Yeah, Olivia. Okay, yeah, that's fine. All right. When do you think? Okay. Yeah, it'll be recorded, and you can catch back up anyway. Okay. So it's just a period of this. I'll adapt it a little bit so it makes a bit more sense. So, wanted to talk a little bit today about using Revit in practice. So I work in a small architectural practice. We run a lot of projects. We use AutoCAD, we use Revit, we use a few different softwares. So part of the conversation is how we actually use Revit, but the other part of the conversation is when we use Revit and why. Do you guys have some experience with Revit? Well, a little bit, a lot of it? What about you guys? A little bit? Okay. Not at all for you? It's okay. We'll go through things step by step from basics. Sorry, if you guys are staying here, you back up. You'll have this area booked out. So, Karen, do you guys know the analogy, Karen? So, the analogy is something that usually there's incentives and there's punishment, right? When you're managing people, sometimes you give them an incentive, you give them a punishment, that's how you manage people. The reason I'm talking about Revit with that is, I think, for most people, the reason you learn Revit is because sometimes you're forced to learn Revit. You hear about all the large architecture firms using Revit. You hear it's important for employability, and you're very much feel that forced to learn Revit, right? Because you get told over and over and over how important Revit is. It's important for parametric stuff. It's important for the big practices use it. It might be the case that someone you work with uses Revit at uni, or again the company you work at uses Revit. Because I find with most people, they're forced a little bit into using Revit, and there's kind of it's a clunky, awful software, but I have to use it kind of perspective. What I want to talk a little bit about today is the carrot. So actually, incentive to use Revit, and there's, I think, a lot of reasons to use Revit over other things. So in terms of what I do in the practice, most of the stuff I do is conceptual. I think a lot more than other people might do in their practices. So one of the things with a lot of conceptual stuff I do is I think most people think of Revit as this, the reason's been for coordination. It's so you can work on massive projects where engineers involved, fire, different consultants are involved. But for us, much smaller scale, and sometimes the conceptual stuff doesn't even go to construction. So what is the incentive there to use Revit? And really it's efficiency, and it's because it ties in to, I think, a positive workflow naturally. So if you have an organized way of working, it translates really well into Revit, because Revit requires you to have a very organized way of approaching a project. It doesn't necessarily mean linear. You can do a lot of design iterations on Revit. That's what we're actually going to talk about today. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think what I want to present is some of the reasons to use Revit rather than being forced into it. So just to go through the basics, especially if you've not encountered Revit much in general. I think traditionally, for the last 40 years, the industry has been quite comfortable with CAD. But in terms of, I think, moving forward, and the reason why then the things are being introduced, is CAD is a bit like the game of telephone. So when you're doing CAD, you have someone that does the concept drawings. It gets developed a little bit into planning drawings. It gets given to one consultant, a second consultant. Everyone do those on your AutoCAD plans a little bit, and it gets put together it goes to tender, again someone else doodles on it a little bit, goes to detailed design, add a bit more stuff to it, but each of those drawings are separate and they're all just vague representations of your design. Whereas the reason we use thin stuff is that your design away, or your thing is buildable, is easy to track changes, it's easy to track design options I'm about to show, and it's just a more, again, organized way of working sometimes. I mean, there's still plenty of occasions that I don't use Revit at all, plenty of projects. If it's heritage, it might be very difficult to model the existing building, the existing site on Revit. If it's a smaller scale project, if all I have is a floor plan from CAD, and I'm just doing a little bit of design work, there's no point putting that into Revit. I think more often what I use Revit for is if I'm doing small scale concept, and again, there's actually a lot of tools for working on concept design stuff. So specifically today, I think out of the reasons I use Revit, we're going to cover a little bit about phasing, as well as design options. But I think in that process, we'll look at a lot of design tools as well, some of the more basic stuff, some of the stuff you might not have thought Revit could do. So we're going to use a real project today, and you here for the ADD workshop. If you could also go on to ADD Google, there's a sample file there. Oh, shit. So for me, I think it's important to contextualize all the stuff you do here with, what happens in practice. Because again, I think at the end of the day, the main reason to use Revit is to be organized, is to have a clear structure through how you approach a project. So we use an actual project that I worked on. The brief is going to be different from the actual brief I had. But if you're on the ADD Moodle page, there's a section for ADD workshops. And if you click into today's workshop poster, there should be a download link for Revit sample file. Are we all right finding the sample file? Yeah, that looks good. You guys all right with the But if you just double click on it, give Revit a bit of time to open, and I'll talk through the brief a little bit. So I don't actually work on a lot of residential projects, but this was one of the projects I worked on. Now again, our brief was a bit different, but because the original architects did a Revit project and the clients were looking for something similar, we recreated the building in Revit. So here's the brief. For what we're doing today, we have a little scenario, just like in real life, just like in practice, of a client. This is the current house. This is the current office, which you can probably tell it's been extended 3 times. In this scenario, our client is a professional dart player. Reason being is I just want a scenario for a little extension on the back where we don't have a lot of design constraints and we can sort of do what we want. So this is the existing kind of office. There's a bathroom in there, there's some other stuff in there. We're going to get rid of that and we're going to design own extension in the back. We look at two different options of doing that. And that's going to be the scenario we'll work with. So some very basic constraints. There's a 1 by 3 meter area you need for darts. That's the brief. You need 500 mil around the court, just so you have circulation space. Probably want a bit more than that. And then we want just a little bit room for tables and things like that. Yeah, between the darts. So that's the building. We're going to generate some. We're going to work on some designs, some concepts, and we're going to make them understandable. But all in all, quite simple. Just to work on design options, work on facing. So if you start, I think everyone has Revit 2025 because it's slightly. Do you have? It opens fine. If it opens fine, it's fine. Are you here for the workshop? That's fine. It's more if you have something before 2025, you can't open the file. We're just really annoying. Do you know what the plan for? Yes, we'll go under the AD workshop. So before we make a start, I'm just going to go through what we're going to do very quickly as an overview. So we're doing two things. We're looking at phasing, we're looking at design option. I think phasing is easy enough to understand for us. If you're in architecture school, we have the existing building. We're going to get rid of part of it. I'm going to do two different options. And when we're looking at stuff in Revit, and in general, it's a good practice, whether you're on AutoCAD, whether you're in Rhino, whether you're on whatever, is especially when you're doing things like removal, you never actually delete the stuff from the file. On AutoCAD, you got layers. On Revit, you got phasing. You assign it to a demolition phase, and we'll go through that a little bit. So I think to start with, let me close what I was doing here. So I'm just going to start a fresh Revit file to begin with. So if you want to just start a new model to begin with, we're just going to familiarize ourselves with the tools, and then we'll go into the example file I provided. So to start with, just make a blank architectural model. And what I'm going to do, and I mean, this is my preference working on most Revit files, is you always open up into the main floor plan view. I would usually open up the default 3D view as well. And you can actually drag and drop this to the right. It's a bit finicky. And nest that like this. A bit like how you have your windows organized on Rhino.
Sorry to interrupt. Are you streaming it to Teams?
No.
There's people on the Teams chat now.
Okay.
Ready to go through it.
Sure.
You don't have to go through it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Give me a second. I'm just gonna jump on the Teams link. Can someone on Teams let me know if you can hear me? There's no chat. Okay. 1 sec. Sorry about this. Just making sure people on Teams can hear. I assume that thumbs up was you can hear me. Great. Okay. We'll continue then. So, also saying we're just starting with a blank Revit file to begin with. We're just going to familiarize ourselves with some of the tools. So all I've done so far is I'm using the default level 0 floor plan, and I've opened a 3D view that I've nested to the right. So just to begin with, I'm just going to draw a simple rectangle, 4 walls. Doesn't really matter what height, doesn't really matter what material, it's just to get ourselves familiarized with the tools. So if we go into manage phases, we can see that there's 2 phases, existing, new construction, quite self-explanatory. What we'll do is we model the existing building in existing, and then we model any of the changes in new construction. What we'll see is when you draw any wall on Revit, you have on the left the phase is created and the phase is demolished. And then in your floor plan, it also has a phase filter showing what phase it is. So for this building we have here with the 4 walls, we're going to assign it an existing phase. And just for argument's sake, this is an existing building and we're going to demolish the wall on the right. We will write phase demolished in new construction, which tells us everything was built, but we're getting rid of it when a new proposal is implemented. Now by default, the current phase filter shows everything, but what we want is to create a duplicate of this floor plan. So we want one of these floor plans to show actually, before we do this, we're going to set up some phasing filters. So I'm not sure why it's lagging a lot. So in manage, if we go to phase, we can go to phase filters. These are the default ones, but we're just going to create a new one called existing, and it's only going to show existing, and it's not going to show demolished, and it's not going to show temporary. So what that lets us do is to set up one view with just showing all the existing stuff, and a different view with showing existing and where it's demolished. And again, you can create another copy of that, where you can create a new wall, which is creating a new construction, demolish never, and that shows the 3 different phases. On this one, you change the phase filter to just show previous and demolition. So now you have 3 views. One view of existing, one view of existing and what's being demolished, and one view with existing and any new construction. Does that make sense so far? So we'll jump into the sample file. I'll put some of this in practice, and we'll start looking at the design options as well. So if you're joining us from Teams, if you want to go into the MMU Moodle page, it's under ADD, the ADD workshop. And if you click on today's poster, there's a download for the sample Revit file. So just a recap of the brief, and for people on Teams who wasn't there for the brief, this is the house we're looking at. And for our example, we're looking at demolishing this office on the back and then building a new extension. The phasing properly. So I'll just quickly skip back up to speed to where we were. We'll use the default phasing filters instead. I was clearly messing with it too much. So we'll stick with our 3D view. We'll rename this 3D existing. And then we're going to create a copy called 3D new. In 3D existing, we're going to select everything again, filter it down to just our main components. And set them to existing, demolished, none. And then we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to select this extension on the back. We're going to filter out the curtain walls. I'm going to set the face demolished to new construction. Let's make sure we covered that wall as well. So we're going to keep the 3D existing view as it is. In the 3D new view, we're going to set this to just showing previous and new, which gives us our house without extension, which is what we want. Now, for the purpose of design options, we need to, the design options stores only what's new. So to make the design option process a bit easier, we want to remove a section of this wall as well. We'll keep this wall back in our design option. So if we go back to manage, I'll set up our design options quickly again. So we're going to set option 1 as primary. We'll delete the existing option. And then we're just going to create a new option called option 2. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to split this wall horizontally. So there's a bottom section and a top section. We're going to take this bottom option section and we're going to click add to set, and we're going to add it to both design sets. So it doesn't look very different because both design sets have this wall. But we can now see is if we delete this from one of the design sets, when you switch between the design options, it changes. So, I mean, in this case, we might as well leave that wall out in one option. So in one option is just an opening, and in the other option, we'll do a double door. So again, you can see here, we've got two design options, 1 and 2. Now by default, this view is just letting us switch between these two, and it's displaying whichever one we choose. The more organized way to do this is to, again, make a duplicate of this view and change the first one to option 1, the second one to option 2. We can then go into each of these views, go into your visibility and graphics option, go into design options, and have it show specifically the option you choose. Oh, that's option 2. So each of these will only show, each of these views now will only show the design option that's relevant. The only thing that's a bit finicky about this is you still need to make sure that up here under design options or down here in this bar, whichever one is easier for you, you need to have the correct design option selected before you can actually start modeling things in there. So you can see if we have option 1 selected, you can't really do anything. If you have options 2 selected, you can edit it. But if you have the main model selected, you can't. So if you're in option 1, you need to make sure you have option 1 active. If you're in option 2, you need to make sure you have option 2 active. So for option 1, we'll do some simple geometry for this. I mean, we can do something simple, we can do something, yes, go ahead.
Are you recording?
Do what?
Are you
I am recording.
Okay.
I appreciate it might be a bit confusing. I was
Because
also
I
went back
wanted
a little
to-
bit, but.
Yeah.
So we can work on the first design option to start with. Do we want something simple or something funky? Funky? Okay, we'll do something funky. So, if you used Revit before, you probably use this to make walls. That's boring, because we make straight lines and boxes, and people tell you that Revit limits creativity. Instead, what we're going to do, for funky stuff, architecture, component, model in place. This is where the fun stuff happens. We're going to use wall for this. You can change this later, but it's easier to make sure you have the right one selected to begin with. So now we're in this model in place mode. So you can see that we have a different tab now on the top. We have extrusions, blend, blah, 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 and you have a different set of tools. First thing we're gonna do is we got enough, usually we set up some reference planes, but we got enough planes that we can work with this. We're gonna do a sweep blend, because that's fun. We're going to go to our left view, just so we're looking at it orthogonally. Probably the easiest way to work with. We're going to sketch a path, and to sketch this path, I'm going to set my work plane. So Revit knows what direction I'm looking at when I'm drawing my lines. So I'm going to set my work plane, and I'm going to pick a plane. I'm going to pick this wall right here, so I know I've got that wall picked because the blue line around it. It's very important that you pick the right work plane, otherwise it's not going to let you draw. So if you pick the floor, for example, and you're looking at the floor from this direction, that's no good as a work plane. We pick the plane where we can draw onto it. So I'm going to start by drawing the extent of the wall. So from the bottom to the top, under sketch path. What the sweep blend does is it takes one geometry from the base and it takes one geometry on the top and it blends together, a bit like Loft in other softwares. There's two ways you can do this. You can pre-make a profile and load it in, or you can draw each of the profiles, which is what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to select profile 1, edit profile, and I'm going to the top view for this. So for this, the idea I had, if I open Paint, I'll do some architecturing. The idea I had was, because we're making a dart room, we're going to take a dartboard. I'm going to take one size of it. So one size of a dartboard looks something like this. Right, with your, we know how dartboard makes. So we're going to take this, I'm going to make that the inspiration for our facade. So on the bottom, I'm going to make a series of curves. I'm just eyeballing this. Let's make it something reasonable. So we'll do a grid of, how much space do we have? We'll do a 1 meter grid. So I'm just using that line for quick reference. I'm drawing a quick arc. I'm going to make a few copies of this from point to point. And on the last one, we're going to cut it short. And we'll do a wall build-up of 300 because maybe that's reasonable. We're going to create a copy of this. We're going to flip it. Make sure we don't have copy selected for flipping it. And we're going to move that back. But we're just going to cut that for now. So we're going to leave with just this. And we're copying that over to create the shape. I'm going to make that bit thinner. So that's our bottom profile. And we can select profile 2, edit profile, and this will be our top profile. So I was going to go through that step of pasting and flipping it, but the easier way to do this is to use the pick line tool. You can't pick that, never mind. We'll just quickly trace that. 1 meter. I'm going to offset that by 500. You see why in a second. I'm just going to eyeball this. We're just going to make sure the proper closed loops. So we have a top profile and a bottom profile that's slightly shifted. And if we click confirm, we get this extrusion like that. We can make it more interesting, but I'm just going to stick with that for now. While we're still editing this, I'm going to move that in to make sure it meets the wall. Now the only difficult thing with this is I want to put in some windows, but I don't want the windows to be this funky, right? I just want normal rectangular windows, and the way we can do that, or to create any opening, is we can create a void extrusion. So in the void forms, you can create a void extrusion. We're going to set our plane to the nearest one that makes sense. So I'm going to use this wall as my work plane. We're just going to draw an opening. Let's use something rational. For a window, maybe a bit bigger. Let's confirm this, and then we're going to make sure this actually cuts through our object. And what you'll find is that creates an opening through the wall we created. We're going to finish that model. Let's just check we're still in the design option, and then we'll put the window in. So to do that, I'm going to go to the top view. Let's put on wireframe. It's a bit confusing, but you can sort of tell that this is the cutout. So we're going to add we're actually going to use a curtain wall to make this window. Again, don't worry if you're not following along with any of this. It doesn't have to be a shape like this. Where is my curtain wall? Oh, it's there. I'll change it to shaded so we can see it. And we'll just apply a bit of a million to it, something a bit thicker. Add a bit of a window reveal to it. Something like that. And we've got enough time, so I'll do something similar for the roof. We can do a similar idea with the roof. And actually we can do this a slightly different way. We're going to use the roof tool for this. So you can do a roof by profile. Sorry, roof by extrusion. I'm going to pick a plane. I'm going to use this plane next to it. We'll just create a simple, slightly curved roof. So on the top, what I'm going to do is make sure the roof extends beyond that. And then what I need to do is to cut that roof so you don't have this overlapping bit. And we'll do that with a vertical opening. And we can actually just select these lines. To make our opening. We should probably have to shift that a little bit because the geometry shifts. So I'm just going to eyeball this for now. And let's just close it with a boring one. Set the base level 0, and we'll just attach it to the roof, which needs to be a bit longer. So that gives us one of the design options. And as you can see, it's saved in one of the options, and then the other option is still blank. If you're following along, feel free to do another design option, however you like. If not, I'm just going to create a quick box, just for the sake of demonstrating. Is anyone following along and want to make a little design option? Or you just watch? Fair enough. So make sure you switch your design option to the relevant one. So I'm in the option 2 view, and I'm in design option 2. We'll do something a bit simpler. We'll just do a simple brick extension. That needs to extend beyond a little bit. We'll put some, I don't know, reveals in to make it a bit more interesting. I mean, we'll just do something simple with this, just to demonstrate the design options. Well, maybe take that concept we use for the facade, but do it for the roof in this case. we'll just select the walls. Again, the filter tool helps us here. And attach these to the roof, which I think needs to be slightly bigger. And we'll give it a small overhang. And we'll attach this wall to it. I mean, just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to set some of this wall to be curtain walls for our windows. So I'm just cutting out a few sections of the walls that we're going to make into curtain walls. And again, we'll just add the same window reveal to them. So what we have then is your two design options. You have that's a good point. You need to make sure they're set to the right construction phase. So new construction, new construction here. At this point, we'll start setting up some of our floor plans as well. So we'll create a duplicate of this called level 0, new option 1. And in our phases, we're going to set it to be show new and new construction. Well, show new and previous and new construction. And we'll set our visibility to design option 1. And then we'll make a copy of this where we set the design visibility to option 2. So you will find that in these views, you only see the active design option as solid, and everything else is this. Let me actually complete that wall. Everything else is in halftone. But once you switch your there's an option to main model. All your views would actually show everything current. Change that to new. So at the end of the day, the reason we do this is so that the model currently is storing two different design options. Let me just fix this floor. It looks quite jarring like this. And what it also means is when you start setting up your sheets, so I'm just going to create a new sheet. We'll use the A1 metric standard sheet. You can drop in your two design options. We'll clean it up a little bit. And you have your two options displayed parallel to each other. Same with your 3D views. We'll put both of them to the same angle. And something we can do as well, because they're different geometry, if we are going for a bit more diagrammatic view, you can select your elements. I mean, you might have different ideas than what I'm doing here, but you can, for example, override these elements with one color. For one of your design options. And then a different one for another. Or you can have, different overrides depending on what you're doing. So for example, you can create a sheet. Of the two options, that's diagrammatically different. We'll scale them down a little bit. And you can do the same thing with everything. It's the same if you go into, say, any of these views and you set up a perspective view. We're not going to set up a full render, but we'll set up a So again, we can have one option that's showing one view, and then another option that's showing a slightly different view, well, of the other option. Does that make sense so far? Is there any questions up to this point? Sorry?
I do get it.
You do get it?
If you get it,
Are you good? Yeah. Yeah, do for each of your views, make a duplicate of that view, and in the visibility setting, set it to show that option. Only yeah, when you're editing it, you need to change it to the correct option. As long as you have the option like selected. So if you, because I mean realistically, it's quite annoying to switch between this and this all the time. I mean that's a good point because in practice, what I would usually do is I make a duplicate of this view that doesn't have any options attached to it. So it's automatic. So if I'm in option 1, it's showing option 1. If I'm in option 2, it's showing option 2. So as long as you're in that option. So if I'm in option 2 right now, anything I model automatically goes to option 2.
So if you mistakenly model something in option that we want, how do we change it?
So for yeah, I mean there's a few ways to do it. One way is say you got, I don't know, we draw this little cylinder, for example. You got an industrial chimney for some reason, and you want this to go to another option. You can select it, go to manage, and click add to set. Okay, apparently it doesn't like me doing that. Well, if that doesn't work, most of the time what you can do is just cut it and then paste it in your other option. If you just copy it or cut it, change your option, you can paste it back in the same location. At the same time, if you, again, as I explained in the beginning, one of the caveats is, for example, if in your design option, you need to add a window to this wall, you'll struggle with that because the way windows work on Revit is that it's hosted by another component. So if we were to put it on the wall is hosting the window. So that wall then needs to be added to the design option. But again, the easiest way to do this is if you realize, you know, look, actually for my design options, on one option I'd like a window here, on the other option I wouldn't. You would take this wall, select it, and add that wall to both of the design options. Then you can go into your design options, add a window to one of them, and then, I don't know, add a different window or leave it the same on the other one. But anything that you intend to change needs to be in a design option, and anything that's going to stay exactly the same, not in a design option. Does that make sense? Because, I mean, because in practice, what you can do and what I use this for is, it's not always, you know, entire buildings or extensions that's different. You might want to just play around with the facade. So you can select just the facade around your model, add that to design option set, and in your design options, you're just modifying those facades. There is, so, let me see, just going back to the phasing options, there is, if I recall correctly, there's always been a problem with phasing and does it still work properly? Okay, it does. So just to jump back, now that we looked at the design options, we'll go back to the phasing bit. So obviously in our 3D now, we've got the existing, we've got design option 1, we've got design option 2. Well then as before, we'll just duplicate this one and we'll have this one be 3D, existing plus demo. We can then change the facing here to be plus new, previous plus demo. You can then set this to new construction and in face filter show previous and demo. And what this now does is you now have actually 4 separate views. You got one view of the existing building exactly as it is. You got one view of the existing building plus the demolition bit. And then one view with one option, one view with another option. And you would do the same with floor plans. So you have an existing. And you probably want the existing to not have a design option attached, so automatic. That should show just the existing. Well, actually, you can put the face new construction, show previous. Show previous and demo. So yeah, I mean, it's the same in your floor plans. You can have that's actually existing. Existing plus demo. And existing. So you have 4 versions of your floor plan. What's existing, what's being demolished, and each of your new options. And if you're familiar with Revit and you want to use any of the annotation tools, it's important to make sure that when you do annotate, you annotate within the options as well. So if you were to say draw a room, I'd probably add a room separator here. And then if you were to label this as a room, that's struggling to find these walls. This is not that. So if you put any annotation elements within the options, they will stay in those options as well. So you can have one set of room labels and one annotations, whatever else, sections as well. I mean, I'm not going to go through creating 4 copies of each, but if you were to do a, into a section like that. If you were to do a section, they follow the same rules as before. And again, the main advantage of working this way, well, it's not really advantage, is when it comes to doing stuff in practice, you are always going to show the existing, always going to show the demolished, always going to show the design options. Working this way, make sure that if you change something in your design options, if you change anything anywhere, everything's coordinated. You're not like you might on a CAD drawing or on a Rhino, if you're making different versions of it on separate drawings, you have to update something here and update it across every single layer. Does that all make sense? And again, there's the video if you want to break it down. Somebody actually. Sorry? Works, yeah, a little bit of layers, but I find it a lot more organized than if you got a bunch of layers. I think the closest thing is if you set up like layer filters and all this kind of stuff like that, but then still there will be things that, because I mean one of the things that's quite interesting as well is when you start drawing walls, they connect, and obviously we're in the course view, and if this say is a wall with a build-up, I mean the existing wall doesn't have a build-up, but when they have build-up, they all connect together as well, which just works really well, to be honest. Is there anything else anyone want to ask about? Anything Revit in general, facing, yeah?
So if, for example, you want to show the like construction process of they want to do that?
I mean that's a really good question because yeah, there's different ways you can show that depending on exactly what you're trying to show. You know, if you're showing so one thing you can do, I mean some of you might be familiar with this already, but in your modify tab, there is, I've not used this in a long time. Isn't annotate? Can you not do that in a design option? I guess you can't. I was going to use the displace elements tool, but apparently you can't use an option. So I mean, I guess what type of diagrams do you have in mind? Like what kind of construction diagrams?
For example, if the new view part, you have like new grade.
Yeah. You could do. Yeah, I mean you could do that because if you want to show that, what you can do is create again a duplicate of this view, and you can just hide in view some of these, and that'll be a way to break it down. Does that make sense? Yeah, so different versions of views where only some of the elements are shown. Does that make sense? And you can also, I mean, you can play around with this, but there's also this create parts tool, which lets you, I mean, it doesn't really work with this one, but if you have a wall with a build-up, so if you have a wall, say with a build-up, because you can design your frames and stuff as a build-up, you can then use the create parts tool, and you can start taking out some of these sections. So It's a bit finicky, but yeah, with that divide wall tool, you can then start making layers of your wall if you want to show like a detail, for example. Does that help? Is there anything else you want to talk about? Otherwise, I'll probably just wrap up because we've gone through what I've planned. We're all happy? I'll just check if there's any comments on Teams. Alright, well, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
It'll be uploaded, I think at the same place, I'm not sure. I'll double check, but it'll be uploaded. Thank you very much.